From Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara, we have Neme Ditabu, Seche Sewa Mekyani, Sene Kechugluade, Luni Tangchig Nyembojin. So, this very day, where I am free of sickness, have adequate food to eat, and I'm free of harm from others. Nevertheless, this life can deceive us in an instant, and the body is like a short-term, something on short-term loan. It's very good to remember this again and again. I think one time Leksuk, we were having lunch, and he was pointing out how much better the food was than it used to be, and we had all these different special things to eat today. So that I remembered that verse then. I said that today, when I have so much to eat, who knows how long that will last, or how long I'll be able to eat it. That's maybe the other question. So we left off here. Actually, does somebody have a clock? I didn't bring mine today. It's good to know, or watch, whatever. I just put it here. Yeah. So we left here as Zhenyang, right? You all have different pages than I do. So I don't know where you are, but you hope you can find where we are. Zhenyang, right? Furthermore. So in terms of the context, right, we had the Zepapo Chewa, the greatness of the authors. We finished that. And then we have the Dembe Chewa, the greatness of the teaching itself. Dhammaki Chewa, the greatness of the instruction. So that has the four aspects, right? Demba Tamche Gyalme Dope Chewa. So the greatness in terms of you realize all of the teachings are non-contradictory. And then Sungak Tamche Dhammak Dushawe Chewa. So that the greatness that all teachings of the Buddha dawn as practice, personal instruction for your practice. And then Gyawe Gomba Delak Dunyepe Chewa. So you easily understand or can find the intention of the victor, the Buddha. And then Nepa Chempo Rangshiki Gape Chewa. So the great fault, which means abandoning the Dharma by seeing the teachings as contradictory and adopting some and abandoning others, that naturally ceases when you have this teaching that combines all of them into a graded path. So within the first one, we had Dempa Tamche Gyalme Dope Chewa. So there's this debate that comes up that if you're a Bodhisattva practitioner, then you don't need to practice the Hinayana teachings. So that's what we've been addressing, and there are these different quotations that are given from the sutras and the shastras, the commentaries. So Tsongkhapa was citing the Abe Sama Lamkara and then the 25,000 Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. Of course, we don't want to get confused. To say 25,000 verses is not quite right. Maybe it gets confusing because it's not in verse, right? Janja Sempa Nagini Danigi Lam Dangipatang. That's not a verse. It's not in meter. But what it means is that they count the number of syllables, right? So if it's not in verse, if the text is in verse, then in one verse is one verse, one sholaka in Sanskrit. But then if it's not in verse, then a sholaka traditionally would have 32 syllables because 8 per line. So then you just count every 32 syllables, that counts as a verse. So there's groups of 32 syllables, and then it has 25,000 of those. But then in Tibetan, it's only 28, because the verses that eight syllables per line in Sanskrit is only 7 syllables per line in Tibetan. So it's 28 syllables, or sekbar. The between every dot, right? That's a sekbar. There's 28 of those. Although I would imagine, because in Tibetan the words aren't going to line up, the syllables aren't going to line up with the Sanskrit, so it may not be exact. But 25,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra is about 3 volumes, 1,000 pages each. So within that, we had this discussion that actually, if you're a bodhisattva, you should practice. It's contradictory. If you don't practice the Hinayana, then you haven't actually practiced the bodhisattva teachings correctly. So then Zhenyan, furthermore, there's another reason. Yonder bezobe sangini, so perfect Buddhas, or samyak sam Buddhas, kyon chokre zepata, yonden chokre zup mingi. So kyon chokre means like partial, yeah, one-sided. So they don't just cease some part of faults, and they don't just actualize some part of qualities. Kyungi rik tam je seching, so they cease all faults, all kinds of faults. And yonegi rik tam je zopayin, so they complete all kinds of good qualities, all classes of good qualities. De drupe tekpa chempo yang, so also similarly, a person who's a Mahayanist who's trying to achieve such a state of Buddhahood, kyun tara gokjing yonen tam je kibina, so because they therefore must cease all faults and generate all good qualities. Tekpa jen tamjegi pandogi yindigi rik tamje, so all the kinds of qualities of realization and abandonment of all the other vehicles. Tamje, tekpa chempo lam duba, they're all included in the Mahayana path. So de chir, sangi drupe tekpa chempo lamgi, tepa chempo lamgi yenlak tu sunrap tamchi tude. So for that reason, they're all included. He's taking the same subject from the last sentence. So all those qualities are therefore included in the teachings on the branches. So yenlak du sunrap tamchi tude. Okay, so. I see. All teachings of the Buddha are included as branches of the Mahayana path of a person who's achieving Buddhahood. That's what this says. So the yenlak du, sungrap tamche, all sungrap are included as those branches. Kyo nare zepayang. So nare again is just partial, some. So just abandoning some faults. And yonen nare keep a minpe, so you don't just generate some qualities. Tupe sung mepe chir. Kyon minpe tupe sung mepe chir tang. Re sepa kepa. Re se kepa minpe tupe sung mepe chir tang. Te tamche kyang tepe chempe eju mepe chir. Okay. Yeah. So it's like a double negative here. So there's no the teachings of the Buddha don't say that. It's not the teaching of the Buddha that you should only generate some qualities and abandon some faults. And all those also are not. It's not that they do not actualize. Not something that the Mahayana should actualize. So they are something that the Mahayana should actualize. So then we have Gyode. This is like kachik, right? Somebody says. So somebody comes up with an objection. Parotu chimpe tekpa chempo drupala. So in order to enter into the paramitayana, the exoteric Mahayana path, tekmengi denu ne shepe lam tamchi gyunayang. So okay, I'll grant you that you do indeed need the teachings of the Hinayana Pitaka in order to enter the Mahayana path, or the exoteric Mahayana path, the paramitayana. However, Dorje Tekpar Drupala, so in order to enter the Vajrayana path, Drupalani, Parcheki Tekpe Lam Nam, Tumawa Migirde. For that, all the Paramita paths are not common. You don't need them. Lam Mitumpe Chiro, because it's an uncommon path. It has a different practice, so it doesn't require all of the practices that are in the exoteric sutra teachings. Dian Chemi Rikte, so Tsongkhapa is saying, this is also very, very wrong. Paroto chimpe langi ngoni. So the nature of the path of the Paramitayana, sampa, jandudu semke patang. So first of all, the intention, which is bodhicitta. Chipa, and then the practice. Paroto chimpa drokla, lopardua yenla. And then the practice is included in the 6 perfections. Deini, napatam chidut engupar. So you need to rely on those in all respects. Pel dorje tsemole diketu. So this is the what's it? It's the Vajra peak tantra. How do you say it in Sanskrit, Vajra? Vajra.
Shikara?
Shekara. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. So this is a yoga tantra, actually, right? You have the 4 classes of tantra. So action, performance, yoga, highest yoga tantra. So this is a yoga tantra, but it's with the source of most of the vows, the mantric vows, we say, because they're like when we recite the vow for taking the mantric vows. There's the recitation of the pledges of the 5 Buddha families. That's actually a direct quotation from this sutra. And most of the 14 root downfalls, and actually all of them, are in this sutra. So those are common to both yoga and highest yoga tantra. Although there's a slight difference in some of them, like some of you might know, the 13th root downfall of mantra is damsik mi dempa, so not relying on pledged substances. So this is like when in Sog, if you refuse to take bala madana, which doesn't apply in yoga tantra because you don't use that. But here in yoga tantra, it's understood slightly differently. That's not visualizing yourself as a deity, which is the pledged substance in that context, or using the vajra and bell and so forth. But in any case, the point is he's quoting this text because this is the source for the tantric ethics. And this text is specifically saying that you should rely on the mind of bodhicitta. So to say that in tantra you don't have to practice the exoteric paramitayana, it's contradictory to the ethics of tantra. So jikido, as it says there, so even for the necessity of your life, you should never forsake the mind of bodhicitta. And furthermore, never abandon the practice of the 6 perfections. So that's exactly, he just says, the root of behind the paramitayana is the thought of bodhicitta and the practice of the perfections. And here's this tantric text saying, don't abandon those. So furthermore, so furthermore, it says the same thing in many other mantric texts. So so at the time when you're entering into a mandala of highest yoga tantra, dumar, so many times like that, dumaryang tumawatan tumo moyebe dombani ni sungobar zungla. It often says you need to guard both the common and the uncommon vows. The common vows are going to be the pratimoksha bodhisattva vows, and the uncommon is the mantric vows, right? So ngamani, the common vows, he's saying, it's those very bodhisattva vows. Domba zumani, and the way to guard them is sultram sum la sope janjut sempe lapala. So it's in the trainings of the bodhisattvas, such as the 3 kinds of ethical discipline. Right, so some of you might know this isn't Lama Tsongkhapa here recite this. Right, there's the verse about the perfection of ethical discipline. Right, Sota Drangsam Soki Chiran Sota Drangsam Dorji Tekpai Chesan Soki Chian Mi Tongxing Gache Du Don Semjin Don Drupe Sutram Padochin Bar Padochin Zog Zingilo. Right, so Sotar Jangzem Dorje Tekpai, so the Pratimoksha Bodhisattva mantric vows, Chetsam, so the boundaries of those. Chetsam Suki Chira Midangshi, may not abandon those even at the cost of my life. So that's the first one, the Sultram Sum, it's the Nyebar Dompa. So guarding against wrong action. So this is basically it's the 3 vows, the Dompa Sum. And then Gechu Du is the ethical discipline of gathering virtuous deeds. That's the 6 perfections. And then Senjim Gidondrupa, which is enacting the welfare of sentient beings, Senjim Gidondrupa, that's usually the 4 manners of gathering disciples, which is much later in the Lam.RIM. But it includes many other things. So like if you read the Bodhisattva vows, especially the secondary vows, which are more extensive, it says that each vow is included in one of these 3 kinds of ethical discipline. So it sort of summarizes all of the different practices of bodhisattvas. So so you need to practice those very you have pledged, you have committed to practice those. When you take a tantric empowerment, you've committed to practice all those trainings of bodhisattvas. So sem kene, so after having generated the mind, sem kene lapala lopar sem kelamba jindu. So you must train in the way that you've committed to train. Shindu lopa le shenpe lam. So there's no other path other than the one that you've committed to train in. Parote chenpe chepa layam mebechu. Within even the paramita, there's no other path other than that one. And then furthermore, dorje kandro tang sambuti tang dorje semonam su. So then we have first the dorje kandro, which is an explanatory tantra of the chakra sambhara, yeah. And then sambuti, that's another tantra. And then dorje semo is what we just mentioned, the Vajrapik tantra, right? So it says chi tang samwa tepasum dambe chuni malusum. So this is actually what I was just saying, the pledges of tantra. When you take an empowerment, you recite this. You have the pledges of the 5 Buddha families. These are the pledges of Amitabha, right? So I will uphold all the teachings of the outer, secret, and 3 vehicles. So the outer is the 2 lower tantras, and then the secret is the higher tantras, and then the sekpasum is the Bodhisattva, Praitika Buddha, and Charvaka. So you have to uphold all of those. Garan Bache, he was pointing out that sometimes some traditions have chi nang samwa, like outer, inner, and secret. But he thinks that this is correct to say outer and secret and 3. There shouldn't be nang. But if it is, then there's a different way that sometimes they interpret it. So yeah, say she uba megi damsik, right? The pledges of Amitabha. Uba megi damsik sunwe kapso. In that context, Sumpatar, as it says in that context, nagi dompa zimbanas. If you're going to uphold the vows or the restraints really of mantra, nikilango picture. You need to commit to uphold the other ones as well. So didakla nangkak mindrawe cha tentun tongne. So nangak is things that are allowed, and gak is things that are that you're not allowed to do. So mindrawe cha tentun tongne. So you see all kinds of different things, right? The point is that, of course, you see in Tantra encouragement to do things that would seem to break your lower vows. I mean, like I said, taking the bala madana, you're taking alcohol, and if you don't take it, then it's a root downfall. I'd say actually, this is a side point, but if people are interested, my understanding from talking to some of my teachers about it, if you don't take the alcohol for a reason such as for example, if you're an alcoholic and if you took alcohol, it would excite your addiction, that might be a good reason not to take it. But the point is that you don't have a negative view of it. You don't think this is inappropriate. I'm a monk. I can't take alcohol. As a tantric practitioner, you have at least in the tantra, you have the permission to do it in that case. But it would seem to contradict the Pratimoksha vow, where it says very clearly there is no permission under any circumstance to take a drop of alcohol at the cost of your life. That's quite clear in the Pratimoksha. The Buddha, there's this quotation they give that it's like the taste of alcohol. It tastes very sweet. That's the how do you say, the immediate result. The long-term result will be fire. I think that it burns. The idea is that of course, it's understood it's not a non-virtuous action to drink alcohol. It's a neutral action, but it incites non-virtue, so it'll lead you to further non-virtue. So to say that a monastic should take a drop of alcohol is contradictory to the Pratimoksha. So it would seem that these things contradict each other. So tongne, so satrang ta tamchidu gyawar zimpani. So there's people who see that, and they hold them as completely contradictory, like hot and cold, the Tantra and the Sutra teachings. Dopa shindu tsingwar zelo. So it's very clear that this is an extremely coarse conception, meaning that they haven't really examined very closely what the Tantras are saying. They just get that impression from a coarse analysis of it. So Detana, so for that reason, Mixel Chenki Ngangak Gare Matok. So there are a few cases where there are special kinds of allowances or prohibitions, such as taking 1 drop of alcohol. Right, so it's very clear. Pabonka Rinpoche says this very clearly in his explanation of the sok, how to perform sok, is that if you take more than a drop of alcohol, then you're breaking your vows also. It's completely inappropriate to just drink, drink without restraint during the sok ceremony. So there's this one little thing that you take one drop of alcohol, for example. So Sungrap Nam Shindu Tunpe. Other than that, they're very much in accordance with each other. They don't contradict each other. So Tekpa Sum A La Nga Tabu Goma Goma Jupana. So if you go, into from the lower of the three vehicles, or the five paths, the path of accumulation up to the path of no more learning, if you gradually go higher and higher through them, you need to include all the lower qualities of the lower paths. It's not like you have the qualities of the lower path, then you abandon those and you get the higher paths. It's that you build on each other. So of course, this for us nowadays, this is kind of taken for granted in the Gelong, but this is a pretty strong statement. There are definitely people who had that view, and there are still people who have that view today, that these are completely different paths and they involve different approaches. And this is what was seen by Atisha when he came to Tibet, that there were the people who practiced Tantra and they denigrated the ones who practiced Sutra, saying, you're on the slow path. And then the ones on Practice Sutra were denigrating those practices in Tantra, saying that this is not the teaching of the Buddha and you're just breaking all the vows. This is debauchery. So Tsongkhapa is saying if you understand them properly, they all work together and they all build on each other. So Paro to Chimpe Lamni. So as for the path of the perfections, Gyewayum. So again from the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. It doesn't say which one. Let's see if I can figure it out. But Gyewa de Tamajon Tandar Gangshukpa. Kune Paro Chimpatiyen Shemayin. So yeah, maybe this is 8,000. I'm not sure because it's in verse. I might guess that it's 8,000, but it could also be there's many Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. The most likely one would be 25,000, but I'm not sure. I could look in the book, the English. Yeah, it is. It's 8,000. It says 8,000 Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So all Buddhas, all victors from the past, and those yet to come, and those abiding now, for all of them, they teach nothing other than the path of the perfections. She Sumpatar, Sangi Sudrupe Lamgi Shungjing, Shungxing Taboni. So like the root essence, Shungxing is like the, how do you say? It's the central supporting, trunk maybe. I mean, I say wood. It sounds a little funny in English, but like in the stupa, you have a shungxing. You have in the center of the stupa, there's a piece of wood pole that goes in the middle. So that's like the central support, the central pillar. Yeah, pillar might be good. It doesn't have exactly the same meaning, but in English we use it that way. So the central pillar of the path that traverses to Buddhahood, Tabu Yinpe. So because the six perfections are they dorda miromo. It's not appropriate to just forsake them. So Dini Dorchi Tekpale Kyang Mandu Katsawena. So this same statement is made many times within the Vajrayana teachings. So Katsawena Dugyu Nike Lam Tumo. So therefore it's a common path of both the Sutra and Tantra. So De Tengdu. So but on top of that, you have the common path, but in addition to that, Sangaki Lam Tumo Mayimpa. So you have the uncommon path of Vajrayana. Wang Tang, Damsik Tang, Dompa Tang, Rinpa Ni, Kor Tang Chepa. So you add on empowerment and pledges and the uncommon vows of Tantra, and then the two stages, and then the retinue, meaning the other associated practices. Ninpe, so you add those. Sangisa Drpa Nyurwa Yinki. So therefore it becomes a faster way to travel to Buddhahood. But long tomawa dornani nora chempo. So, but if you forsake or abandon the common path, then that's a major mistake. So Dedabo Go Manena. So if you don't find a understanding of that, you don't gain understanding of that. Chu revela ngepatarna chu revela ngepatarnang re nepana. So you might find a counterfeit understanding. Like occasionally you might get a counterfeit understanding of some particular Dharma teaching. It seems like the right tarnang, right? It's often translated as counterfeit. Right? Tar means like, and nang means appear. So it appears like. It appears like the real thing, but it's not. It's not a real understanding. Shen nam bong shing. So then you abandon all the other ones. Kepardu tekpa gomala nupatar. Tekpa gomala nupatar nang shik kepana. Oh, the tarnang. Yeah, again, tarnang. So tekpa gomala tarnang shik kepana. So also you get a counterfeit understanding of the higher path, of the tantric paths. Rimba tar tekmengi denu tam parodu chimpa nam pongshing. So then you gradually abandon the Hinayana path and the Paramita path. Ngalayang gyude oma sumla sopa pawag. So then gradually, even within Tantra, you abandon the lower Tantras. You're practicing highest yoga Tantras, so you abandon action Tantra and so on. And the gyurwe. So if that happens, drel chela jung yejing number minba che chiwe chu pongwen legi. So yeah. So there's drel che jung ye. This is talking about the heaviness of a vow, of a downfall. Right? We have this in Vinaya a lot. So drel che jung ye means something that has a very serious gacha, right? So thing to gacha in the contrast of Vinaya, it means the disadvantage of doing something. Like in the case of the vow against killing, the gacha is that it harms people, right? That's why killing is a wrong action, because it's harmful to others. So something that has a very large gacha is called drel che jung nye, meaning it's very relevant. It's not just this minor gacha that doesn't really have much problem. And jung nye, meaning it arises very easily. It's not something that you're unlikely to do. It's actually something that you're quite likely to perform this action. So jung nye shing. So it's relevant and it's very likely, which is the nampamipa che chiwe. And also it has a very heavy ripened result. And what is it? It's chu pongwe le. It's the karma of abandoning the dharma. So abandoning the dharma arises easily. It's very relevant because it has a very large gacha, and it will have a very heavy result in the future. Legi dripa chempo supa girde. So you accumulate such a heavy obscuration as that karma. Legi dripa. So legi dripa by itself, the karmic obscurations, right? We call that the karmic obscurations is the karma of abandoning the dharma. When you abandon the dharma in the future life, you will have karmic obscurations such that you're not able to see the value of the teaching and other things like that. So it becomes an obstacle to entering the path. So Dei Kungni Ododombagyuro. So the source for that I will explain below. So I just said that I made this statement about the abandoning the dharma and how heavy it is, and I'll explain below. I'll give the source or the citation of sutras that talk about that. So Dei Chir Dambe Gun Tene. So all the teachings say that relying on a worthy mentor or a worthy guardian is an important teaching, right? So this is because I think he's referencing, like, you have the secondary mantric vows, right? Saji Yanlak Saji Changtan Chamin Pong Dampe Gondan Joklang Korcha. So that second line, this is in the 6th session Guru Yoga, right? You have the Sawet Yanlak Saji. So the four branch and as the branch secondary mantric vows, you have the four root non-negative actions, which are the first four of the 5 precepts for lay people, and then alcohol. So like the 5 precepts for lay people, and then chamin, so just abandoning generally negative misdeeds. And the next line says dampe gonden, you will rely on a worthy guardian. Right, so this is one of the vows of Tantra is to rely on a proper teacher. So sungak tam se ganjak sik ganjak chik sangyewe chak yendu gyurwe sula. So in all teachings, not just sutra teachings and mantra teachings also, these are an essential element in a single person becoming a Buddha. In order to traverse the teachings to Buddhahood, you need to rely on a proper teacher. So you should gain a stable ascertainment of that. Tanda nyamsu longwa nam. So all people who are practicing now, nyamsu longshing. Nyamsu longwa nam, nyamsu longwa nam, nyamsu longshing. Ngosu juk dok manupa nam kyang. Aneki juk manupa gyunsun du chene. Mi bon. So. Okay, so the things that you are practicing or that you will practice, as well as ngosu juktok minupa, those ones that right at the moment you're not able to do, right? Juktok, so you're not able to engage in this practice right away. You're not at the moment able to turn away from this particular negative action. But even if that's the case, ranigi juk manupar gyunsendu chene mipong, you shouldn't abandon it under the guise of the reason, well, I can't do it. I'm not able to engage in this. So, like, for example, if you have a particular practice that's very hard for you, you shouldn't say, well, therefore, it's not the teaching of the Buddha, because I can't practice it. So, dedakla ngosu juktogi gone, so by directly entering into or engaging in those practices and turning away from those particular actions, nyamso lempa nyamso longwa shik, nam shikna, nyamso longwa shik, nam shikna, Ong Yamdu. Yeah. So Ong Yamdu means like, may it be the case. Have the thought, may it one day be the case that I'm able to practice in this way. Samne, so you think that way. De gyurtsok sapa. So then accumulate the causes to be able to do that. And dripa jama, and purify the obscuration. So he's saying engage in purification and accumulation. And Mola Dapar Chao, and make prayers. This is what my teacher said, Truden Rinpoche, in our text that we translated, the Mastering Meditation, so his text on Mahamudra, right? He said, for most people, when they read about Mahamudra, they're not going to be able to practice it, and don't have the illusion that you're at the level to be able to do so. Then it doesn't mean you shouldn't read about the teaching, because you see the benefit of it, and therefore you start now to build the foundation to be able to practice it in the future by accumulating the collections and purifying negativities that will create the foundation that in the future it will be possible for you to practice it and make prayers dedicating that that's the case. So sakjang, right? This in Tibetan, you'll hear the Tibetans talk about this in colloquial, sakjang. So accumulation, purification, right? So what kind of retreat did you do? A sakjang, I did prostrations and Vajrasattva or something, then you say a Sakjang retreat. So through this, Ningpo me tokpar, so without waiting long, without having to wait a long time, loi tu je cheru songde. So the force of your mind will get stronger and stronger. Derak tamche nyamsulem nupa gyros, and eventually you will be able to practice them. So Gewe Shenyan Tompa Rinpoche Janakang. So when the great teacher Tompa, right, she was Drom Tompa, right? Gewe Shenyan Tompa. Tempa Tamche Drupshi Lamgi Kier Shipa Nye Lama. So my teacher, right, Atisha, he was the one who knew how to take all the paths of the teachings as a path, like a square, to Drupshi Lamgi. So the different commentaries say different things about what the square is here, but it seems that the conclusion is just, it means like you kind of put it all, it's not any particular four things, just that you put it all into a compact box that it all fits together. So you put all the teachings together that they fit like a square, which is symmetrical and neat. So She Sungte, so he said that, but Atisha, Dron Toba said that about Atisha. So these words are something that it's really worth examining. It's a great, it's a source for a lot of analysis. So de tarna, so that for that reason, damngak di, so this teaching, this instruction, dongaki ne tamche gansak chik sangyawe lam du tu. So it combines all of the teaching, all the main points of Sutra and Tantra into the path for a single person to become a Buddha. We had that earlier about it's not like there's one for one person, one for another person. They all apply to anybody who wants to become a Buddha, can practice all of these teachings. So tripena, so then it guides you in that way. So therefore it is endowed with the greatness of being able to realize that all the teachings are non-contradictory. So next we have Surat Tanshe Dhammatu Chawa. So the second greatness is that all the scriptures, they dawn as personal instruction for your practice. So chir tarpa dupa nam la. So generally speaking, anyone who wants to achieve liberation, trail tang yungi pende. So immediate trail and then long-term benefit. So immediate and long-term benefit and happiness. All immediate long-term benefit and happiness. Drupe tapne, the method for actualizing that. Gawe surap niinde. It is the very teachings of the Buddha. Langdungine tamche. So, and also all of the points of what to adopt and what to abandon. Dumpala trua malupat drawani. So that as for the Buddha, who's free of all mistake, right? Tupadan drawani. Yeah, okay. So as for a teacher who is free of all mistakes, dange nyakik is only the Buddha. The Buddha is the only one. In Bechira, Detaryang Yulamale. So as it says in the Uttara Tantra. Kanchir gyale cheke gayang diktin dina yumende. So why? Because in this world there is nobody who's more wise than the Buddha. Gawe cheke gayang diktin dina yumende malu deni chokni. So among all of them, he is the supreme one. Sulshin kunkian agikian shenmenpa. Sulshin. So there's nobody else whose wisdom surpasses his. Kunken giken kenmenpa. De chir trongsong rani kishap. Dode ganyen de mitruk. So there, this. Okay. So these teachings of the sutra that were given, that were codified, put it together by this very sage. De mitruk. Don't mix them up. De mitruk. Or they are not mixed up, you could say. Tupsul shikjir dean dam chulani no bachipper gyur. So yeah, if you destroy, or if you tear apart this method of teaching of the sage Muni, dam chulani, then you'll greatly harm the teachings of the Dharma. Shesumso. So basically, the point is, that the Buddha is the supreme teacher. So do not be careful not to make problems with his teaching. Don't mix it up. Don't have a wrong understanding of it. So dena gyewe ka dode tang gyude rinpoche nam tambe chogyano. So therefore, the teachings of the Buddha, which are the sutras and the tantras, the precious sutras and tantras, they are the supreme of all instructions. So de tarnayang, however, tsedengi gondrel tang dampe mengak tang midampar kalarantoki shukpe. So in terms of being able to actually enter into these under your own power, enter into these teachings of the Buddha without the explanatory commentaries, which are the authoritative commentaries, and the lineage of instruction. Chirapki dulchanamgi, so the people of later times, like us, dulchanamgi gomba minepe, they won't actually understand the intent of the teaching. They'll misunderstand it. So Singde Chempo Nangi Gongdrelgi Tenshutang Mengapnam Zedo. So therefore, all of these great trailblazers, especially Nagarjuna Asanga, that's the main trailblazers we talk about, but others, they composed all of these commentaries explaining the thought of the Buddha. And they gave the instructions. So de chir mengak number dapayina. So if the instruction is pure, Shung.CHEN.MO namla ngepa terwa shigugi, it should give you a correct ascertainment of the great texts. Other than that, mengak le chitsam jang kyang ka tang gongtrel chenpo nangi don la ngepa ter minupa an. Otherwise, if no matter how much you train in the instructions, you're not able to ascertain the meaning of the teachings of the Buddha or the explanatory commentaries. It does not give you such ascertainment. Or, if it was to teach a completely contradictory path, then it's something you should abandon only. Such an advice is wrong advice. So Gaya means kachi, right? Somebody says. What some people might say. Shung Chenpo namla nyamlangi ne mepe shechu su chejing. So Shung Chenpo namla. So in all the great texts, nyamlangi ne mepe, there's just these there are explanatory teachings without any real points of what you actually should practice. Nyamlangi ne nipo don dobe menga. So but then Surdu, like on the side, separately from that, there are some pith instructions that teach the very heart of what you're supposed to practice. It's very different than what's taught in the great texts. Zurdu yoparkone. So some people hear that. They say they have that understanding. Tabeche ranla shepatam, drupeche loklopani yoparzimpani. So the holy dharma that was taught to you, and then drupecho, the one that you actually, I see. So the one that you're taught, and then the one that you actualize when you practice, you hold them as totally different things. Loksu, loka. Prima mepe dog yutang. So the stainless sutras and tantras, Trima mepe gondragi tenchu la gupa chenpo kiwe gekcheching. This becomes a major obstacle to generating respect for the sutras and the tantras and the stainless explanatory commentaries. And furthermore, derakla nangidon miton pe chikogya sam chupao she niepe ne sinpe. Okay, so derakla nangidon mitonpe. So they don't explain the inner meaning. Chi gogyat sam chupaho. So they just how do you say? Cut is not the right word in English. It's cut in Tibetan, but they kind of eliminate some coarse misunderstandings. It's like some people, like at the time of Atisha, there were some people who were saying that like the text on logic, the pramana, right, that it's not really about how you practice. It's just for eliminating some coarse misunderstandings that some non-Buddhists have, but it doesn't actually relate to what you should practice. I think that's what the point is here. Some people say that it's not, these texts aren't about what you should practice. They're just about, eliminating wrong views about what the teachings are. So nyepe nesu she nyepe zesu zempe chu pangwai legi. So then you get you should know that thinking that way causes you to accumulate the karmic obscuration of abandoning the Dharma. So dena tardu namla. So therefore, those people who wish for liberation, milue dabe chokni. So the supreme instructions that's undeceiving for such people. Shung.CHEN.MO nami inmo. So it's those very great texts. Deyang. So furthermore, rani lo jempalazope gyunsenki. So taking as a reason the fact that you have an inferior intelligence, lo jempa. Dambe chokdu shungdetsam latene ni minupe. So you think I can't ascertain based the meaning based on those great texts. So dambe mengak latene terakla ngeber tsewer chao. So therefore, I'm going to search for understanding based on some instructions, some pith instructions, rather than those great texts, which are too hard. Nyamdu mengak tsugo pa yingi. Okay, I think he's actually saying this is correct attitude. The point is that, okay, so the point is not that you should abandon the great text and think they're too hard, I'm just going to rely on instructions. But what you should think is, it's true, the texts in and of themselves are too difficult for me to understand by my own power. Therefore, I will rely on the instructions as a way to understand the text, as opposed to understanding something totally different from the texts. And therefore, I will be able to understand the meaning of them if I rely on the lineage of instructions. So Shungnam Ni, so all these great texts, Chikya, Chupatsam Yinpe Nipomela. So yeah, they just eliminate some external wrong views, but they have no essence. And in the pith instructions, Mengak Namni Nangiton Tompe, they teach the inner meaning. Chokdu Nyamdu Misonga. Don't think that they're superior. So the right thing is to think that they're a stepping stone to help you understand the great texts. To think that the great texts are useless and the instructions that you get from a teacher are the real thing, then that's the misunderstanding. So now Rinpoche Janda Rinchen Gelong. So the great yogi Janda Rinchen, he said, Tangakla nang Tenzin Sumpani. So yeah, as for putting the meaning of the instruction inside of you, like internalizing the meaning, Beu bomlak til sam shikla ipeneva la misergi. So it doesn't mean that you just find an ascertainment of a small piece, like the amount that can fit in a pot that's, I think it's saying like a pot made of a cow hoof. That's the idea here. It's a bit of an antiquated language, but Beu, So it's like there's the amount that you can fit in there, in the hoof. It's mean that you should understand the meaning. That all the teachings should dawn as personal instruction, right? So when it says internalize the meaning of the instruction, it doesn't just mean internalize this little bit of instruction. It means understand that all of the teachings of the Buddha are instruction for you. And likewise, Jo-Chenpo Loma, also the student of Atisha, Gompa Rinchen. Right, so Gompa Rinchen, Lame Kyang. So also he said, Atisha Damgak Den Takchuru Tok Chiktu, Den Chok Tiktu. Okay. Atisha Damgak La Den Tok Chiktu means on one sitting, in one meditation session, right? The instructions of Atisha. Lungagi Som Tudu Lakpe. So he grinds to dust all the body, speech, and mind. I think the point is it grinds to dust all wrong actions or wrong engagements of body, speech, and mind. Right? It doesn't actually grind to dust your body, speech, and mind. Dudu Lakpe Ta. So now Shung Tamche Dangak Du Kowashik Jung. So now I've attained an understanding of how all the teachings can dawn as personal instruction. So because in one session of practicing his teachings, it ground to dust my body, speech, and mind, then I understand why that the teachings are all personal instruction. So you should understand it that way, Tsongkhapa is saying. And likewise, Tumpa, so Drum Tumpa also says, so having trained in many dharmas. But then you've trained in many dharmas, you've studied many teachings. But then you think, when I actualize, I should search for something totally different. Norayan, then you're mistaken. So now, you see he's just quoting, before he was quoting sutras and tantras and so forth, now he's just quoting sayings of the Kadampa masters to show that this is the tradition of Kadampa. To have everything done as personal instruction. So though you train for a long time in many dharmas. You totally don't understand the way of practicing them. When you wish to practice them, you think that you need to look elsewhere. All those people who think that, so they're mistaken on account of not understanding what was just talked about. Dear Dempani Zule. So as it says in Zu by Vasubandhu, the Amritamakosha. This is the last verse of the text, right? So the Dharma of the Buddha is twofold. It's the teachings of Scripture and the teachings of realization. Right? So the teachings of Scripture are the Scriptures themselves. The realizational teaching is the realization that's passed on over the generations. So there's no other teachings other than the Scriptures and the realization. As for the teaching of the scriptural teaching, it's a manner. It's a manner for ascertaining the way of putting the teachings into practice, into personal practice. That's all it is. Right? The teaching, the scriptural teachings, and dope tampa, and then the realizational teaching. Tenla papana, after you've ascertained that, jitar tenla papata, in the way you have ascertained it, drupa, it's a way of practicing it once you've ascertained the meaning. Drupa yempe, teni gyundre sudrawayenda. So therefore, they're cause and effect. The scriptural dharma becomes a cause for the realizational dharma. So for example, tak gyupana. So if you're going to race a horse, ngola. So first you show him the race course that you're going to race around. And Tenzin, after you've shown him that, then you race on that very course. You don't show him one course and then race on a different course. Yeah, so that's what he says. Kyusa shen dene. So having shown him a different course, yuksa. So kyusa means like the race course, and then the actual place you run. Yuksa shendu chena. If you do a different one. Shege du gyurata, that becomes the last object of ridicule. Tusangi shenshik tenlapatne. So if with your study and contemplation, you ascertain one thing, and then drupana shenshik druptu kalurung. How is it appropriate then to do something totally different for your practice? So de tariang gompe rimpa tamale. So gomrim, right? This is Kamala Shila's gomrim, the three stages of meditation, the last one. Yang tupatang sampale junwe sherapki. So with a wisdom that arises from hearing and contemplation. Topa gangipadeni. So that whatever you realized with that wisdom is the very thing that you must meditate on. Kompale junwe sheraki kompa chawaye. So you have the three: the wisdom of hearing, contemplation, and the meditation. So what you ascertain with the first two is what you meditate on with the third one. Shendu mind is not something else. So, and he gives this example. Ta gyuki sa tene gyupa jino. It's like showing one race course and then running on another one. She sungso. So so for that reason, this instruction, dapadi shenyan tensu ne, from the manner of a relying on a virtuous friend, Jine tan lata ki par, so up until calm abiding and special insight, which are the last chapters. Sunra gondrel tan chepe langi ne tam che sanwardune. So it condenses or combines all of the main points of all the paths that are taught in the scriptures and the commentaries. Tera tamchela jogom gupanamla jogomche. So those of you who need to practice placement meditation on those, you practice placement meditation. Chene gongopanam, all those ones which you need to analyze and meditate and do analytical meditation on. Then you analyze them with individual analysis, wisdom of individual analysis. So that combines together all the points of all the stages of the practice. Tripana, and then it teaches you in that way. So therefore, all the teachings of the Buddha dawn as personal practice. So if it wasn't like that, Lamgilu Yonsu Mazope Chashe Karela. So if there was just a few pieces of the teachings of the path, without without including all of them, so without being devoid of individual analysis, so if you put that together and practice it, first of all the scriptures won't dawn as personal practice, and furthermore, then you'll abandon them like something that's just for a mere, we said before, like just getting a rough understanding of the points as opposed to what you actually practice inwardly. So all the subjects that are explained in all the great texts. So they appear to be only things that you must analyze with analysis, with wisdom. So when you practice them, if you abandon them and then when you practice them, how are you going to get an ascertainment of how they can dawn as personal instruction? So so if those are not the supreme instruction, so what other superior instruction to that? What instructor is going to find such a thing, or what instructor of such teachings are you going to find? So if all the vast and profound sutras and all the commentaries, if they do appear as personal instruction, so likewise, all the great teachings and all the great tantras. So I say first we have the sutra teachings, right? So here all the profound tantra teachings and all the commentaries on them, all those also, they will easily, without difficulty, they will appear as personal instruction. So then you gain an ascertainment that holds them as personal instruction. So otherwise there's all these wrong views that hold them as inferior dharmas that are not the actual instructions. Such people who hold those views, those views, without anything remaining, you should just turn them all away. Get rid of all those wrong views. So then we have the third, right? We have the so the greatness of the teachings, not appear understood as not contradictory. Then so the greatness of all the teachings appearing as personal practice, and now we have so the greatness of finding the teachings of the Buddha very easily. So all the great scriptures, such as the teaching, we keep having this phrase over and over again, that all the sutras and all the commentaries, dabe chok yin. So although they are the supreme instruction, yonsuma jangwe gansak le dambo. So beginners who haven't thoroughly trained in them, so if you don't rely upon personal instruction from a teacher, then you won't be able to ascertain the meaning of them, the intention of the teaching. So the point, as you're making earlier, that it's not that you should abandon the great text and just rely on personal instruction, but without the personal instruction, you won't understand the great text. So although even if you do gain some kind of understanding, granted, like if we grant that, if we were to hypothetically say that you did, which you won't, but if you did, Shindu ringwatang sek shindu chewil doso. It will take you extraordinary hardship to do so and take a long time. So lame mengak teneni. So if you rely on the teachings of of the instructions of a Lama, then you'll easily understand. So Dampa Deni, this instruction, Ka Tan, Tenchugi Nela, Nipa de Laktu Tera Gyurde, it easily gives you an ascertainment of all the sutras and sastras. De Tsuni, so this way of practicing, Ka Namsu Gipratam Pagyuro. So within this text, in each chapter, in each section of the text, I will explain extensively how that particular point functions in the context of whatever subject I'm explaining. So we have the fourth, Nipa Chenpo Rangaksu Jowa, so the great fault of abandoning the Dharma, it naturally ceases. So maybe we leave that, because it's a little longer, we can do that next week. But yeah, if people have questions in the meantime, maybe that's good.
Regarding the Vala and Madana, so if it has the power or the importance of even overruling lower Vala, so what is the importance of these two substances?
What's the importance of Vala Madana?
Why is it so important to take it?
What's the point? So that's related to the understanding of the tantric path, and there's many levels to it. But it seems that one of the main things, it has to do with sort of caste barriers in ancient India. That people instill in India, it's a big thing that what you eat, what you put into your body, it has a strong. It's in India, it's a very strong demarcator of your status. So a Brahmin, it's unthinkable for someone who's a strict Brahmin to take meat and alcohol. Like if you read Gandhi's biography, for example, he's very ashamed that he took meat as a teenager. He had this phase where he ate meat because he thought that he could defeat the British if he was stronger. And then later he in his biography you can see that he's very embarrassed even to talk about this. And then there's this part when his wife Kasturba, she was extremely sick, and they wanted to give her some meat or something to help her recover, and she just said, "No, I'm a Brahmin. How could you even think of giving me such a thing?" So in India, that's a very strong part of it, is how we kind of create these barriers, because in the Sok ceremony, everybody is equal and everybody is together a practitioner. It says some of the lines like the outcast and dogs and pigs and Brahmins and everybody, they're all the same nature. So enjoy. So it's breaking down this sense of some things are permissible, some things are not permissible. It has to do with creating this dualistic view. This is a lot of things in Tantra. Like, it's understood, of course, recklessly or sort of without any restraint, engaging in sexual practice and engaging in harming others, like killing, it's going to have a harmful effect. There's no doubt about that if we look at it. But if we have this conception of that's not me, I'm good, and these are the bad people do that kind of thing, then it creates this kind of dichotomy, and you gain this very strong sense of yourself as I'm a good do-gooder, and there's the bad people who take alcohol and meat. So I think part of it is trying to break that down as in Tantra. So likewise, as a monk, yes, it's obviously there's going to be consequences to drinking alcohol. It's not useful for a monk. But at the same time, it's just taking a little drop. It's to break down the sense that I just completely abstain from that kind of thing because this is who I am. Then it becomes a kind of conception of a self, and it increases your dualistic experience of things. So I think that's part of it. And of course, within Tantra, there's a way that these substances function to manifest bliss in the body. That's a different thing also. So those are quite advanced times. And in the Gelong understanding, that as a monastic, you don't do that. So although there are cases where alcohol can indeed, have certain positive effects on the body of someone who's an tantric practitioner, as a monastic, you wouldn't do that. But at the same time, it's sort of staying connected to these practices. They call it the closely binding substances. They keep us connected to these very profound practices. Like Tsongkhapa is saying here, that you're not able to do it now, but you make the thought, this is, I have this sort of faith or, conviction that this is indeed a profound practice, and I want to be able to practice it in the future. There's that. I think His Holiness Dalai Lama, he said once. There was a question of like when are you qualified to to engage in these kind of practices. He said, well, when you can just as easily eat feces as you could eat filet mignon, and you can just as easily drink urine as you could drink fine wine, then maybe you're ready to engage in these practices. And there's even that story that you may have heard of Serkan Dorje Chang, with the two, not the current one, but the two previous, two lifetimes before, there was the teacher Serkan Dorje Chang, who was quite we're known for his tantric behavior that was quite unconventional. This is during the time of the 13th Dalai Lama. So there's this story of he was drinking alcohol quite a lot, and one of his attendants was having doubts about it. What's he doing? So I supposedly it says that he just knew that his student had this doubt without didn't share it, but he understood it. So one day they were walking together, and they came down to where there were some pigs, the pig farm or something, and the little pool where their urine had all collected, and he just took his cup and put it in and drank some. And he said, when you can do that, then you can behave like me. There's an understanding in Tantra that there's a way to transform these. This is out of the deeper understanding. The first understanding, as I said, is that it's just breaking down this very strong sense of oneself as that they're pure in a contrived way, and seeing that fundamentally everything is pure. The meat and alcohol, it's conventionally it could be harmful. Fundamentally, it's a pure substance like everything else. But also that at very advanced levels, one can actually use those substances in the path. So staying connected to that. But honestly, I am not an expert on that. So this is just my little bit of understanding from what I've read about. But it's understood to be quite a profound thing. So within the context of the vow, it's not that you have to understand it. It's just that in the meantime, the 13th root downfall is to just reject this entirely and say that this is inappropriate and we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't. Monks should not be taking drops of alcohol. And then within that, then gradually to try to understand what the purpose is behind it. Okay.
Another question is kind of related, and it was something I've had in my mind for some time, but now it's related with this about the dates, the good and bad days for like cutting your hair.
Right. Okay.
A lot of people when I tell them about this like kind of advice, they kind of just regard it and just think, that's not necessary. It's just kind of trivial. But then, like this, Tsongkhapa is saying here that it's it is a teaching or it's something that Buddha said in the sutra, right? Mm-hmm. So then, just to discard it is kind of
that's a very good point. That's a difficult question because there could be two extremes, right? There is one extreme where you just if something doesn't make sense to you, immediately you disregard it and say this is bogus. The other is to just kind of blindly accept everything. This is also what we're encouraged not to do here. And we go to debate for many years, and you should question these things. So there are many possibilities. It's possible for one of the main things is that we distinguish between interpretable and definitive sutras. So just because a sutra says something doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Doesn't mean that you're rejecting the sutra. So for example, there is this saying that if you just recite the prayer, like it says this in the King of Prayers, if you just recite this prayer, you'll be born in Sukhavati. This is understood to be interpretable. If it was that easy, then there would be no need to do anything else. You just recite the King of Prayers again and again. But it's understood that it's meant for as an encouragement, that if somebody feels discouraged that I can't create any kind of merit, it's to show you, okay, there is great merit in this and sort of being using hyperbole to say the degree of merit. And it's understood that it's in terms of the time, that if you understand it over a long period of time, then it is true. That if you recite that King of Prayers, then it creates the imprint that gradually, over a long period of time, will help ripen your mind stream, that you could eventually be born in Sukhavati. But it's not that it just happens immediately. So any teaching, you have to examine it very closely. And of course, there's the deeper question, which we don't always examine in this monastery as much, because it was a harder thing in the tradition, but we have to also look at where the teaching is coming from and the historical background of certain things, which it's a hard question to address, because sometimes it can certainly rub against some of the the aspects of the tradition. But personally, I think if there's historical information available, it's we shouldn't just ignore it. We have to look at it kind of with a sense of both courage and non-bias. Right? We have to look at where the different teachings, what is the source.
So regarding
so that, I'm just saying in a general sense, that particular teaching, it's like, if we don't, the point is, if we don't understand it, it doesn't make sense to us. That to not just disregard it. In that particular one, for example, with the cutting the hair, personally, for me, I don't really understand how it could work. But Lama Tsongkhapa was my teacher, and I had a lot of faith in him, and he seemed to think it was quite important. So for me, that's enough to whatever. What day I cut my hair, I can just follow that schedule. It doesn't make that much of a difference. It doesn't harm anything. But we have to be very careful, and that kind of thing, I probably just wouldn't share with most people, because if they don't have faith in Rinpoche, then it would be hard for them to see it in the same way. And you don't want people to think, oh, these Buddhists, they do these weird things. They don't have any. If you can't explain it yourself, then it's probably better not to bring up the topic, because I can't explain why it's worthwhile. But Pabonka Rinpoche, for example, in the vow, within the Bodhisattva vow, several times it talks about the abandoning the Dharma, both in the root and the secondary vows, the different forms of that. And he says several times in his commentary on it that you shouldn't take this to mean that when you debate, you can't question this. And actually, that's a big mistake. When you're debating this, you should question it very intensely and really try to ascertain, does it make sense? Is it reasonable? Why was it taught and for whom? Otherwise, it can just be this kind of blind acceptance of it that isn't, this tradition understand, that's not very stable. It might at first seem that everything works and it all fits together, but over a long period of time, it won't be a very stable kind of faith. So that's maybe, I hope that addresses your question a little bit. It's a big topic. Yeah.
You were mentioning the vows of Amitabha before.
Yeah, the pledges.
The pledges. Mm-hmm. Pledges. And regarding the one to uphold the three vehicles. What do the commentaries say regarding Mahamudra or Dzogchen being part of that? Or because Mahamudra, I think there's the Tantric Mahamudra, which is the end of that part, so you should also hold that. But I think Chögyal Namkhana Rinpoche was saying that the Dzogpa Chenpo can be divorced from the three vehicles. It can be just practiced in itself without the sutra and the tantra underlay. So I just wonder, what do the commentaries say? If you take the pledges of basically of highest yoga tantra, then you should practice Mahamudra or Dzogchen, or is it not speaking about that? Does it encompass the three vehicles or not?
Okay, so first of all, there's the question of Dzogchen, right? Which I really can't address because that's a Nyingma practice, right? And so this is Tsongkhapa and his interpretation of the sutras and tantras. This is what we have in the Gelong system, and the other schools have different ways of understanding this. It can often be quite different, and so it's kind of with the approach of ecumenicalism, we have to be careful and not just denigrate them. But it may be that to some extent they would seem to have a different approach. That then you have, of course, the Gelong school, which is quite obviously different in a lot of ways that Tsongkhapa often criticized. But there are Gelong practitioners today, and they've influenced the Kagyu and Nyingma a fair amount. So it's sort of like what they say in debate is you always, whenever you're talking to a particular person, you have to know what you hold in common, what views you hold in common, and talk with that. So, if I was going to debate with a Nyingma practitioner, and I say, no, you're wrong, in Peicharenko, it says in the LAM.RIM, well, that doesn't work because they don't accept the LAM.RIM.CHEN.MO. Right? Then you have to come back, bring the debate back to a tantra that you both hold that root text in common. But they would say, well, I understand it in a very different way. So, okay, but then you can't say, oh, you're wrong because I disagree with you. Then you have to learn to debate in that context. And if you're debating with a non-Buddhist, you can't quote the sutra because they don't accept it. Then you have to, if you're going to quote anything, you have to quote something that either you both accept or you quote their own scripture, to show that, look, you're contradicting what you say to accept. So, for example, some teachers I know, one of my college professors was an atheist, but he read the Bible very closely. So then when he discussed with Christians, he could point out, look, you're contradicting the Bible. You claim to be propounding the Christian teachings. So it kind of depends on who you're talking to, right? And generally, with Dzogchen, the understanding is that the goal of all tantric practice is to dissolve all the winds into the central channel, into the indestructible drop at the heart, right? And so in the Gelong system, the way to do that is to practice the generation stage, and then use that all the power of visualization, and then the isolations to gradually bring it into the central channel. So the understanding is that in Dzogchen, there's a completely different approach on how to do that. And you don't have to practice the generation stage, and you don't have to practice the isolations and the completion stage practices that are common to this. So that's not something that's done in Gelong practice. There's no sort of, how do you say? There's no corollary for that in Gelong practice. So it's sort of not within this system. So whether that's effective or not, I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has clearly expressed his faith in the efficacy of that practice. So that's one thing. No, but I won't comment much more because, as I said, I'm not an expert in Nyingma by any means. But they do have the 9 gradations of vehicles, so it does seem that they have some understanding that you go through these. I'm not sure with Chogyal Namkhe Norbu, what his basis is. I'm sure, he's a qualified teacher, so it's something from the tradition, but I don't know enough about it to say. In terms of Mahamudra, in terms of Gelong understanding of Mahamudra, that's something quite different, right? So, for one thing, you have the distinction between Sutra and Tantra Mahamudra, or Mantra Mahamudra, which they don't have in Kagyu Mahamudra. So this is kind of a unique Gelong interpretation that we see, especially first in the Panchen, the fourth Losam Chökyi Gyaltsen, Panchen Lama's texts, about the Sutra, which is a totally different thing. Sutra Mahamudra is not a tantric practice. It's a meditation on emptiness, using the mind as the object, the focal point. And then you have Tantra Mahamudra, which is ultimately not anything different than the isolation of mind within the completion stage. Right? It's when at the end of the isolation of mind, when you actualize the example clear light, that is Tantra Mahamudra. It's not like you have them kind of it's a shortcut, separate path. But it honestly, there are a lot of things that I don't understand. That it's there are questions about exactly what's going on, because you have this it says that Tsongkhapa gave the transmission of Mahamudra to Tokten Jabal Gyatso. So what does that mean? If you're just taking that Mahamudra is the actualization of the example clear light at the end of the isolation of mind, he didn't just put him through the whole path all of a sudden. Then he went through all the stages, the generation stage. It sounds like there's kind of this direct transmission. I don't know what that means. Maybe there's more to it that somebody understands when they're at that level. But generally speaking, it's understood to be there's this gradation, that it all builds on each other. Furthermore, what's perhaps more important is that even if somebody does get some kind of direct transmission like that you don't just denigrate all the other teachings. You don't say that this is the one teaching and everything else is useless. But you understand how they all, whatever way they become some kind of, whether it's literally that it's like a stepping stone or it's like a training that allows you to be, ready for that kind of transmission. In any case, it's understood to be, it's understood to be useful. It's not something that like a tantric practitioner upholds them in the sense that you fully understand 3 vehicles and you could teach somebody based on their proclivities. Of course, you don't yourself practice as it said we talked about last time. You don't finish the path of the Parteka Buddha. You don't enter into solitary nirvana, but you understand what that is and how that's a skillful teaching in a certain context. But in terms of the 3 vehicles, it's not understood to fit into those per se, right? The 3 vehicles are all the sutric vehicles. So the Tantric Mahamudra, you have Chi, Tang, Sangwei, Tekpasum. So you have Chi is the 2 outer tantras, the lower tantras, and then Sang is the 2 inners, the higher tantras. And then you have the Tekpasum, which is the exoteric teaching. So they're the Sang in that context. It's the secret tantras. So the Tantric Mahamudra would fit into that.
Super helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering about this a lot, and it might be helpful to know that I found Tulku Urgyen in his biography. He does talk about that when one practices Dzogchen, one would also at some point would also practice the I can't remember the words exactly, but it's like you would practice the actual sadhanas,
right?
And do and do all the stages. So it's not like. So there's different perspective on this. So there's one perspective which Tulku Urgyen is a really renowned teacher. Was a teacher. So he says, it really says that, it's not only practicing Dzogchen.
I'd have to, because, I don't know, as I say, a lot about it, but if, for example, we have the text LAM.RIM.CHEN.MO, right, the essence of, essence of wisdom, but in English, there's a translation of it, Yurang Eshe, it's light of wisdom, I think it's called. So that's a standard traditional Dzogchen text. There's the root text LAM.RIM.CHEN.MO, which is composed by Padmasambhava, and then the commentary by Jamgon Kongtrul, which is standardly used today. So that is like LAM.RIM. It starts with the lower paths and all the practices, and then it gradually builds. And then it goes through the generation and completion stages, and there's all these things about Sok and fire pujas and all these ritual practices. So I can't comment because I don't know what he was saying in that particular context, but I know, most Dzogchen practitioners that I'm aware of are definitely practicing sadhanas and visualization as deity and so forth as some grade of the path leading to that final realization. Yeah.
Alright, we do the short mandala. Saji
Goodbye.
From my two collections, vast space that I have amassed from working with effortless practice for great length of time, may I become a chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. But I don't reach this state, may I be held in your open compassion for all my lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings. May I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings to the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings not yet spread or once spread have declined, reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time. By even this graded path to enlightenment, the wonders of virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. We are all human and non-human beings who live in adversity, create conditions for practicing the excellent paths, never be parted in all their lives in the purest path praised by the Buddhas. When someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the Tenmo Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, may the prosperity spread everywhere.